Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the Bommer number LB8004-454-652. This is a somewhat less common hinge, only because three-knuckle hinges is what this is, are simply less common, but there are times, there are projects, that are, there are small size projects that I do where I'm free to specify the products that I like to use, and this would be a perfect example of one hinge that I very much like to use, and it's an LB8004 from Bommer. Okay, number of reasons. First of all, a three-knuckle hinge is certainly a little bit cleaner look than you're going to see on a typical five-knuckle hinge with exposed bearing packets. And let's take a little closer look at this hinge. What might strike you first, obviously, is the three-knuckle design. It might strike you as narrower than it is tall. That's because it's a 4.5 by 4, and we'll talk about that in a moment. The three-knuckle design has a cleaner pin arrangement as well that will seat down and make itself flush with the top of that hinge barrel. Can still be removed should it need to be. Okay. It's also a heavyweight hinge. This would be 180 thousandths of an inch leaf thickness. So let's properly dissect the part number, and then we'll get into the extended description down below. Probably the best way to do so is to just review the product catalog at this time. Okay, so we are dealing with the part number LB8004. 454-652. So LB from Bommer, and this is out of their catalog. The concealed lube bearing is made from a special nylon bearing material and is maintenance free and requires little to no oil or grease. It is a concealed bearing is basically what it is. This hinge is going to be substantially capable of handling lots of load. It's a very clean looking hinge. Okay, the 8004, that's going to mean a number of things, and that's going to concealed bearing is your LB. 8 means three-knuckle. Okay. The 004 from the product how to order page, and this is in the manufacturer's catalog, which I'll show you later how to get to. LB is lube bearing, 8 is three-knuckle, 0 is full mortise, and is a standard style hinge rather than it being a wide throw or a swing clear, etc. variant. And then the 4 in the part number stands for heavyweight steel. Okay, 8004. So three-knuckle is obvious. Being a full mortise hinge, you can see from the swag on the hinge leaf here that they're meant to be mortised flush to the edge of the door and frame when the leaves are brought parallel, so that they maintain that typical margin that you would find between the doors and the frame. This would be a standard hinge. It's just full mortise. There's nothing unusual about it. It's not a slip-in or a swing clear or a wide throw like I had said earlier. Then the 4 in the part number, it actually means two things. It means it is not only heavyweight, so this hinge should be 180 thousandths. My caliper tells me 0.181. Okay, but it also should be made of steel. Okay, which it is, and that is also in the finish part number, which we'll get to. Now the 454, that is a reference to the height of the hinge, which is 4.5 inch tall, and a reference to the width of the hinge as well, 4.5 by 4. So you probably know that the most common hinge is 4.5 by 4.5. Sure it is. It absolutely is. But in lots of instances, a 4-inch wide hinge is a smarter hinge to use, and actually considered by those of us in the industry as best practice. And here's the scenario that you might consider it as well as best practice. So best practice on this hinge would literally give you the idea of a hinge that is in total a 1/2 inch smaller in the width. Well, the question ultimately becomes, why is that considered best practice? Well, in lots of instances, okay, where we have a frame, okay, you've got your hinge barrel here. Okay, you've got your door. The distance from the center line of that to the face of your frame is what we're really talking about. In lots of instances, you will have a condition where your frame wraps the wall. Right? A couple of studs. Keeping this vertical axis of pivoting as close to the face of the door and frame is advantageous for two reasons. Number one, doesn't seem like much of a reason, but it is. Projecting hardware. You basically tuck this closer to the face of the wall. To the wall, to the face of the frame, and to the face of the door. Okay. It's only a 1/4 inch, but one is more correct than the other, and having it closer is more correct. The other reason is that as you have that vertical axis of pivoting closer to the face of the door, the hinge does a better job because there's less overall steel that the weight of the door is going to work to fatigue itself on. Having that vertical axis of pivoting tucked as close to the face of that material is always going to be considered advantageous. That's verified by the fact that in pivots, where you see offset pivots versus center hung, you'll always see a higher weight capacity in a center hung sort of pivot than you will in an offset. Now, you'll get extreme weight limits on offset hardware, offset closers, but you're not going to see a 3,000 pound offset closer or offset hardware, whereas we can do that in a center hung. Okay, we can do a center hung pivot and that sort of extreme weight. It's an extreme example illustrating this. So you do it for aesthetics, it'll look nicer and less projecting hardware, but you do it because it's a smarter way to utilize the mechanics of the hinge itself. Now, in a scenario where you have an 8-inch block wall, okay, well, now you need, if you want that door to go past 90 degree, you do need to start to think about that. You might want it to wrap and go all the way maybe to 100 degrees, okay? Or maybe what you have is an extremely large wall, and you really need to think about where that axis of pivoting is, okay? You might need to have, so when that door gets from here out over to here, let's illustrate that a little bit better. Okay. You get your vertical axis of pivoting when your door is in this orientation versus your door being in this orientation. If you want that door to go and cycle to 180 degrees, you need to think about where that vertical axis of pivoting is. But certainly when you have a flush wall condition, certainly when you have a condition where your frame is tucked into the back of the frame, where your frame wraps the wall and encapsulates the end of the wall, 4-inch wide is going to certainly be considered as best practice. Now, if you do need to go to 180 degree, you do need to know, what your clearance is going to be. And when you have your hinge, okay, even in the case of our beautiful, 3-knuckle hinge here, okay, what's the difference from the edge of the leaf to the center? What's the overall width? And you'll be able to lay that out. There's a formula for determining wide throw hinges as well, which can, of course, be discussed as well. But the point of the matter is, why did I select 4.5x4? Because I know that we were wrapping the walls, and I want the vertical axis of pivoting tucked as close to the face of the opening because it's smarter mechanically for the hinge. And these are 16 gauge 3.0 doors. So I want, it's a heavy door to begin with. And plus, and these are in a hallway as well. If you've walked down a hallway, I've done it. I've walked through a hallway and managed to crack the face of my watch on projecting hardware. So you want to suck that back as best as possible. Now, let's move on to the finish code. And the finish code is basically going to be, on this hinge, it's going to be 652. And 652, that means a couple of things as well. Let's take a look at that. Now, 652 is going to mean, it'll mean two things. Again, made of steel and in a satin chrome plated finish. This would be considered the most durable of all artificial finishes, meaning this is made of a base material and then it has a plating on it. The combination of satin chrome over steel is considered the most durable of artificial finishes. A natural finish would be brushed finish over solid stainless, which of course they could do. That would be an LB8006, I think. LB8006, that would be heavyweight and stainless steel. So if you wanted the absolute most durable finish, it would be made of steel with a brushed finish. If you wanted an application for a coastal environment, it would be that as well. This is steel. This is interior, where this is going to the major airport in Chicago for a major airline. Interior sort of work. Steel was going to be fine on that. Passage sets on these doors. No need for any security pin arrangements. Let's move through this video down into the extended description information of this hinge. Now, scrolling down to the extended description in the product, it says for heavyweight doors, high frequency. Yeah, you would be able to reasonably expect to handle a door weight. Let me pull up a chart on what you can reasonably expect. Depending on the frequency of use, if you're looking at a low, and you're probably not going to be looking at a low frequency use, so let's say a moderate, medium frequency of use, standard duty commercial type use. Standard duty commercial type use, you probably can expect a door range of about 200 pounds. If you get up to a door that's about 225 pounds and up to 300 pounds, as long as that door is used quite intermittently, you'd be in good shape. So up to 300 pounds. However, if you have a high usage door, you're really looking at 175 pounds. And that is where I'm using this. I've got a 3070 door. It's 16 gauge. It's within my range. It is high frequency. It's a perfect hinge for this. Now, if you needed to go to something heavier, the low-hanging fruit in that regard would be to, even including a door that's over 300 pounds, like a 300-pound door, very light duty, increase that height to 5-inch. So the how much weight will this hinge handle? I would say 175 pounds, up to maybe 250 pounds if you go from high to medium sort of duty, maybe 225 pounds. 300 pounds with very intermittent use. After that, you need to start going with a larger height hinge. And speaking of the height, which we'll talk about as well in a moment, if your door is greater than 3 foot, then absolutely go with a 5-inch hinge. That would be considered best practice for that. Steel hinge with a steel pin. It's a template hinge. It's template pattern. Let's pause this video and take a look at the document below called template. Now the next document is the one that's down here. It's called template, and this will show you all of the dimensional properties of this hinge, and we're dealing with the LB8004 hinge right in here. Okay, that means it's a steel-based hinge, and as you change that last digit, you can see how it goes to brass or bronze, over to stainless steel. Okay. The important part is that the location of the screw holes are defined. So if you're not exactly sure if these locations meet what you need, double check before you order it. And what will change, of course, is going to be the A dimension to the swag line. And you can see how that dimension changes when we tuck that hinge closer to the face of the door versus the more standard 4.5. Okay, brings it in a little bit. Okay, 0.250 inch. Now, let's take a look at the hinge itself and talk about the balance of this material and wrap up this video. And of course, speaking of those screw holes, screws are indeed included. They are all machine and all wood screws are included. By all means, indicate in the comment field when ordering the hinge what screw type that you need. You know, all machine and half wood is pretty common. The point being is it's not unheard of for you to get an inadequate quantity of screws, meaning, well, you're taking this and to the factory, it's most likely this is going to be a hollow metal door and a hollow metal frame. You might be doing a wood door and a wood frame, okay? And they've sent half wood screws. Another scenario that happens is someone orders an 8x8 hinge and then they get nothing but machine screws. So this, you're going to think hollow metal. An 8x8 solid bronze, you know, oil rub bronze, I'm thinking wood by wood, okay? Not a lot of hollow metal frames going to take an 8-inch tall hinge or one that's 8-inch wide. So specify what you need. Then the onus is on the factory to get it right. Anyway, there's options available with these hinges. First of all, security options. You could do a non-removable pin sort of scenario where it will make driving this pin out all but impossible. They can do a safety stud or a security stud. It's a disc that's attached to the hinge, maybe the size of a nickel, maybe 3/8 thick. I'm guessing, don't quote me exactly. It's about that size, with a hole in the other leaf that when the leaf closes, that disc fits into. So the Miami airport, I've noticed they have safety stud hinge, security stud hinges, and NRP. Even if you were to drive that pin out, you still can't separate the leaves because of that stud. It's also possible that you can do a reverse stud where they're on the back of the hinge as well. It goes into a preparation in the frame. So you can really make these so that they're really not coming out. And if you've ever tried to drive a non-removable pin out of a hinge, you've realized it's not really coming out that way. I've tried. It's not coming out that way. Not without significant damage. Okay. Radius corners can also be done. This is obviously square corner. I've had people order heavyweight hinges that were 5x4.5 with a 5/8 radius, and I've said, what's the application that you're using that? Yeah, they've got a wood door and a wood frame, and it came out 5/8 radius. And the client has, it was prepped for the wrong hinge to begin with, and just wanted to maintain that 5/8 radius is the bottom line. That can be done as well, although it's very uncommon. Okay, can't think of any other options other than diving into the link below this video to the manufacturer's page, where you can pull up not only all of the Bommer products that we sell, but a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as that full line catalog where you can really get an overview. The name Bommer, a couple of brothers, 1876 or thereabouts. They literally are responsible for inventing the spring hinge, and they have been in continuous business since about 1870 something. It is the ownership is the husband of the granddaughter of the original of the founders, so it's a family business even to this day. True, the gentleman is certainly elderly because we're talking 150 years almost of that company being around. But you know, when you're dealing with Bommer, people will think spring hinges, but they make a lot more than just spring hinges, commercial and institutional hinges as well. The last thing I'd like to point out is the Bommer logo, and right above it, it says Made in USA, a fact that Bommer is quite proud of, as am I, to represent them. If you have any questions on the Bommer, this is their part number LB8004. 454-652 or any other Bommer product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.